Any of you have worked with legislators or worked with people who work with legislators, you'll know that they're very busy people, the legislators and the people who work with them generally. You'll also know that they have competing priorities and also that they're swimming in a sea of data. It's just the reality these days. And this is just, speaking of data, a little slide I put together just because I was curious and I learned something as well. If you add up all the different representatives that we have in the state of Illinois by level, and of course I'm not even going lower than the city of Chicago. I've got tons of representatives, levels below that, counties, etc. We have almost 250 people that I counted, and the state Senate in particular was third most among all states according to ballotpedia.org. So in Illinois, we definitely have a lot of representatives, and it's a challenge to be able to reach them. So have we met the challenge? This is our attempt at reaching them with our story to try to convey our impact at the University of Illinois on both the district that the representative is in and also statewide impact. So you can see on this sheet that at the top, the data is district based. You're seeing Senate District 1. I'm not actually sure if these numbers are valid or not. This is just a sample. But you can see that there's the photo of the representative, and that's a very high resolution photo. That's important, or we've been told that's important in the past. There in the middle is a graphical representation of their district on a map. And also to the right of that is where the real important part is, the data, and the number of students in their district, how many freshmen, students who graduated within the last year, alums, employees, vendors, extension contacts, U of I extension, clients served by the Specialized Care for Children unit that operates out of UAC, and then also the clinical hospital patients. So, and also I'd like to point out in the upper right that there is a state map with the counties drawn out, and it is shaded. It's a little bit exaggerated because some of these districts can be quite small in the Chicago area in particular. But that just shows you on the statewide map what part of the state we're looking at here for this Senate District 1. So that top part is all just district data. The bottom part is where we see the statewide data. These numbers don't change. So every sheet, we have a sheet for each representative, and on every sheet, that bottom part will not change. But we compile quite a bit of information there, kind of very big picture kind of things about how many students we have system-wide. And I should mention that this is all U of I system-wide and not just for the Urbana or the Chicago or the Springfield universities. So that's why some of the numbers might seem kind of large, 90,000 plus students, 57,000 undergraduates, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I don't need to go through all of these things, but you can just see that they're organized into areas, education, research and economic development, public service. So these are things that we think the representatives would be interested to know. There's also this very busy, but hopefully informative map on the right at the bottom, which shows kind of geographically where our impact lies. And at the very, very bottom, there is a dynamic footer that has contact information. This is a state sheet. If it was a federal sheet, it would have the federal relation contact info at the bottom. So we've been putting together these summary sheets, as we call them, in our office, which is the University of Illinois Office for Planning and Budgeting, since I think about 1995. That's as far back as I see the records going, maybe even further back than that. We use a lot of this data for the annual ISL forms that some of you may be familiar with if you work at a state university, particularly question number 20, which asks for some breakdowns by city of Chicago, Cook County, and then the rest of the state. So it's kind of a good reuse of some of that data. And just to say too that the technologies and the designs definitely have changed over the years, but the goal is always the same, always has been the same, to make sure that the legislators know the impact of the university, both in their district and statewide. So I wanted to show you some of the previous designs. This design was in place for quite a long time, from 1995 to about 2016. And you can see that it's definitely more of a wall of text compared to the design that we looked at a few minutes ago. So at the top, there's lots and lots and lots of text, and there's numbers mixed in there. And then at the bottom, you'll see some of that district specific information in a tabular form. So this kind of flip-flopped over time. The statewide stuff was at the top, and then the district-wide stuff was at the bottom. So it's a reverse of what it is today. And this was a Microsoft Word template, and the data was sourced from a Microsoft Access database. Now, in 2017, a new design was created mainly by some staff in our office and the Office for Planning and Budgeting. And so Nate Wilds and Joe Monacher and some others put this together. And then a designer added a little bit of feedback, but they basically created this. This is, I feel, a lot more visually appealing than the wall of text that we were seeing before. It highlights the legislator. You kind of see like they're the star at the top there. But the same basic concept is, you got your district specific data, this time at the top, and then your statewide data at the bottom. This started out again as a Microsoft Word and Access project. Eventually this was converted over to Tableau and also a SQL Server database. We had some retirement. A few people retired in our office, and one in particular was a huge part of putting these legislative sheets together every year. And there was a lot of manual work that went into it, and we just honestly didn't have the staff time to do that kind of thing. And so moving this to Tableau with the SQL Server behind it really helped us automate, speed up the process, and eliminate a lot of that manual work. So we already saw this, but this is the current design. It's actually still in the process of being implemented in Tableau, but that is in process and hopefully will be done shortly. This was created by Stephen Martin, who's a professional designer in our Office for University Relations. Everyone I've shown this to has really liked it. There are even still a few things here that we will tweak and improve before we get to the final. But this, I think, is a very visually appealing way to present this data. And this is, again, Tableau. This is starting in Tableau and SQL Server. So one thing that I thought would be interesting to talk about, that this is kind of the meat of the project really, is how do we break all of this data down by district? Because I showed you the data, we have a lot of it. We have all these addresses of folks in Illinois, and we have students, employees, vendors, clients from the specialized care for children, clinic, hospital patients. This all is kind of raw data, and how do we get from that to addresses broken down by the different districts here on the right? So one of the main tools that we use is something called Clean Address. And this is a software tool that can run Locally, I think there's a cloud version as well that's provided by Runner Technologies. It's a vendor that works a lot with banner schools. And so there's a lot of, we have it at the University of Illinois basically because of Banner, and they use it to clean addresses there. But we also have access to it through our license to send addresses in to the clean address service through the web and get back a cleaned up address. And the key thing that it sends us back, which we really need for this project, is a zip +4. So if we have a zip +4, then we can use this other part of our process here, other tool, which is the Aristotle district match data set. Ben's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but basically it is just a list of zip +4s for each of the districts. And that's a lot of data. It might sound simple, but it's really not. And they update that often. So that is up to date for us as things change, you know, when lines are redrawn, et cetera. So we get, as long as we have an address with a zip +4, which the clean address web service gives us in most cases, then we can just match that in the Aristotle data set. And then we've got congressional district mapped to a zip +4 in an address, the Illinois Senate district, House district, and even Chicago wards. So we actually purchased the state and the Chicago data sets to be able to do that. We have a very, very high rate of success using this method. Fewer than 1% of the addresses that are sent in are unable to be matched to a district. Some of those are still able to be matched to a city, but if we don't have zip +4, we really can't be entirely certain about some of the districts. So, but yeah, this works very, very well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ben, and he's going to talk a little bit more about some tools for success and convenience.
Hi everyone, my name is Benjamin Sands and I'm Chris's colleague at Planning and Budgeting. I've been working with him on this project for a couple of years now, and I've learned a bit about the tools that we use to help us deal with something so complex and sometimes daunting. We'll be going over those tools now. The first is Aristotle, which provides us with our data, as was mentioned in the previous slide. The second is a variety of sources that we use to find the actual portraits for each legislator. This sounds straightforward, but we have found that it's sometimes the most difficult part of each page, at least in my opinion. And finally, we'll be talking about the wiki we use for all of our internal reference. I wish we could do an entire presentation just in the wiki, but we'll only be able to touch on it for a little while. Now, Aristotle is, at least according to them, the leading data source, and I think that they probably deserve the title. They have won a lot of awards, and they provide a massive amount of data, only a small amount of which is even related to what we use. They have an annual contract system, which I will warn you is not cheap, but it is worth the price. Data is updated quarterly and sent automatically to whoever's on their mailing list. And we have had some problems in the past, mainly because billing can be an issue. However, I want to say that working with them is always very easy. We were able to set up a special vetting system for them within our iBuy purchasing program. And along with signing the contract every year, we don't usually have any problems. Now we come to the portraits. This is always fun. I've included a selection just of Democratic legislators up at the top because I think that they illustrate how much variance there is. Some of them use a neutral blue background, some brown, some gray. One has an American flag, one is in an outdoor setting. There doesn't seem to be any universal system for any of this, which means that for any given person, there might be an amazing photo, a photo that's basically a low quality thumbnail, We might not be able to find one at all. Sometimes it hasn't been updated because they're a new electee. The problems are endless. So the process we use is first we go to the actual source, and I'll show you a list of those further on. Sometimes those are thumbnails. Occasionally, you can inspect the image or open image in a new tab to find out that it is actually a much, much larger and nicer image than the one that they chose to show you. But barring that, the next step is to go to their own website, which may have an official photo or at least a portrait that is as professional and high quality as what we're looking for, even if it's not what's on the website itself. Barring that, we can try Twitter or Facebook or whatever else they might be on. Following that, we can try Wikipedia, which sometimes manages to find photos you would never expect. And of course, all of those are free to use for any purpose. Barring any of these, sometimes what we've done is found the best image we could, and it's a tiny thumbnail, in which case we can search for more examples of that same image on the internet. TinEye, for example, tineye.com, is good for reverse image searches of this kind. However, there's ultimately a limit to what you can find, and fortunately, we ultimately use a relatively small version of the photo in the final product. Now, this is the wiki I mentioned. This is a small example of the wiki. This is just the top of the page, the main page, where we keep information on the sheets we're doing. I'd love to show you the whole thing, but we can't. I'll just say that, for example, this also includes a list of file locations, purposes for each file, and a variety of footnotes. In addition to everything you can see here, contact information, data locations, program locations, all of this is very helpful. Not just because so many people tend to work on a given project, but also this can stand in as an office manual or employee manual. It's nice to have this all here in case someone might leave unexpectedly or enter a coma or something else. You never know, and this is all nice and handy to have. Most important, I think, probably to look at right now is the timeline. You'll see the scope of this. We're never really not thinking about the Sheets project. And there are points throughout the whole year when we have another step to do. I'd also like to warn you, since this comes up at the top, that requesting and pulling data sounds simple and is not. You should assume, if you want to try a project like this of your own, that everything will take longer than you want it to, and you'll need to budget around that when you plan your schedule. Last up, another part of the same wiki is a list of all the official portrait locations. I hope I didn't complain too much about these locations because they have almost all of what we need. There's just always going to be exceptions to that rule. Still, they're the best starting point. And as you can see, at least in some cases, there are high-res images. Barring that, I should note that it is also possible that someone else at your university, for example, the magicians at our own Office of Governmental Relations, will have found these things themselves. I'm not sure how they do it, but they occasionally have much better than we've been able to find. I said I wanted to touch more on the wiki, and I will just briefly. Having one of these is indispensable. Ours has a secure login. It allows for basic editing, anchoring links so that everything can be cross-referenced and cross-filed. And anyone you want can update it, or you can lock pages at will, which means that you can very quickly create a reference document for everything that you do each year and keep it safe and secure and easily available. That's all for me, so I'll turn it back over to Chris. I'd love to answer any questions you might have about this since we kind of blew through it due to time issues, or even answer emails after the meeting. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks, Ben. I just want to say real quickly that Ben is always a huge help to me every year. just kind of whatever needs to be done, jumps in and does it. And in particular, I know it's tricky to get high resolution photos, and you know, tracking all those down can be very tedious. And he's just been a great help in making this whole thing work. So that's a key to our success in this project is it's not all on one person, and it's great to have Ben's help. So I wanted to talk here about how we actually generate the summary sheets. I drew a bit of a flow diagram, I suppose. I got bored of just plain old rectangles, so I decided to spice it up with some images. So that's about as artistic as I get. Just let me go through this kind of step by step, and then we'll dive in for a bit more detail on some of these. So how this works, we take our raw data and we bring it into SAS. I'm sure many of you are familiar with SAS. We process all of that data, and we talked a little bit about that earlier when we were showing how we broke that district data down, broke the data down by district, I should say. And so SAS does all the heavy lifting there. When it's finished with all the heavy lifting, it outputs our summary data directly into a table in our Microsoft SQL Server. And that data is all mostly ready to go for Tableau. But we do transform it a bit and use a SQL view to join in some other information that is helpful for making this easy to visualize in Tableau. I'm sure many of you have worked with Tableau or Power BI, and you're familiar with transforming data to get it just how you need it for dashboards and such. Some of these other things that are peripheral, maybe, you know, along the periphery here. ImageMagick, this is a free tool actually that we input all of our legislator portraits into, and then it does the magic of cropping and resizing everything for us. So Ben doesn't have to do that. Nobody has to do that. No one wants to do that kind of stuff. They can help it. And we have, as we mentioned earlier, about 250 legislators. So yeah, that's just a job that is better left to the computers. We'll talk about how that works in a little bit. Also feeding in here to Tableau, it's kind of obvious at this point that Tableau is kind of the heart of all of this. There are shape files that we get from a couple different sources. We try to just use official sources like from the state of Illinois wherever possible. These feed into Alteryx actually, which is a tool that I know some of you probably are not familiar with. We'll show that in a minute. This can be done with other tools as well, but these shape files are transformed in Alteryx, and the reason we have the shape files is for the district map that I showed at the very beginning of the presentation. And then the latitude and longitude are generated, they're output by Alteryx, and those are feeding into Tableau for the visualization. And then there are a couple things that are pulling from Tableau. There's our website, which has a connection to our Tableau server so that we can show the summary sheets on the web. And also there's this really nifty tool called Tab CMD, which you need a Tableau server to use it, but basically you publish your dashboard to the Tableau server, then you can run commands against the server from the command line. And what I have done in this case is just created a whole bunch of commands to generate PDF files so that I can just do that all in one fell swoop. So just to go through step by step a few of these in more detail. For SAS, one of the things that we do to make this a little bit more efficient is we call macros. So these macros are actually running that process that we talked about earlier, where we're taking all that raw address data and cleaning it up and getting our zip +4. So I had never tried this before in SAS, but I found it to work pretty well. I'm actually directly from SAS calling the clean address web service that we have here at the university. And so it's in a macro so that we can do this over and over and over and over again without having to put the code in a million times in the code. And literally there are about 1 million addresses that we have to process every year. So it's nice to have a little kind of black box in a way that we can see into that processes all of the addresses for us in a batch in a way. So that's using SAS macros. On the SQL Server side, well, actually on the SAS side, SAS is outputting directly to a SQL Server table. So that kind of saves us some importing or ETL processing. We do have a view in the database for Tableau, and it basically just joins the counts by district with legislator information, and that legislator information, as you can see here, is the district type. So mentioned earlier, it's congressional, federal Senate, state house, and Chicago ward. First and last name of the legislator, the ward and district number also are combined. Sorry, this should say district type, but that's ward is a type. They're combined into a single field for filtering in Tableau. And then there's also a flag for the U of I caucus, whether they're part of that or not. So that's something that we actually do display on the sheet dynamically. If they're part of the U of I caucus, we add that text in there. And then also their political party, because we currently are thinking we'll shade the district based on the party. So, and it's just good information to have just in case you need it. This table actually gets updated fairly often. I'm sure it's not unique to Illinois that there are changes. Legislators, are coming and going, and so we have to update this pretty often. But as long as it's in a database table, then it makes it really easy to just update it in one place, and then it flows through to the dashboards and to the PDFs. This is an example of what ImageMagick does for us. So ImageMagick, as I talked about earlier, is a free program that crops and resizes for us in a single step. So this is great because the more processing you do to an image, especially a photograph, the more quality you lose at each step along the way. So we found through some testing that this really helps us keep the images at the highest resolution possible. And so you can see our command that we're using here. It's very simple. It's just magic is the name of the program, and then the file that you want to process, and then you have to give it some parameters. I'm not going to go into all the details on that, but the one thing I will point out is this crop 2:3. That's our aspect ratio because we want a 2:3 ratio. That's how we've set it up in our dashboard. And also the size, 640 by 960 is what we're specifying here. So you can see what this does. This is the original, and this actually is one of our newest representatives. This is Lakecia Collins, and she's part of House District 9. So this is the original file we got. We don't have an official photo for her yet on any of the state websites. So we were able to get this photo, which is unofficial. It's a great photo, but it's not in the aspect ratio we need, and it's way bigger as well. So ImageMagick cropped it and resized it like this. And I don't think I could have done a better job myself if I was going in here and like drawing, trying to get it just how I needed it. So that's very impressive what it's able to do. And like I said, it's free. Another tool I mentioned earlier that is probably not familiar to a lot of you, just unfortunately because it's very expensive, is Alteryx. And Alteryx in this case is just allowing us to do one very particular thing, which is take those shape files for the districts on the map and convert them over to latitude and longitude for display in Tableau. Some of you may wonder why I'm doing that, because Tableau does actually, within the last couple of years, support shapefiles directly. Unfortunately, with my data set, I was not able to get that inbuilt support to work for my use case. So your mileage may vary, you may have better luck, but this was so easy to do in Alteryx. This actually is a workflow that was provided by the company themselves on their in their gallery. I put the link in here, and I just went to the gallery, downloaded it. I didn't do anything to this, so I get no credit for this. This is created by somebody else, just shared with the Alteryx community. And so all I had to do was go here and update the file name to my file, click run, and then it output exactly what I needed. So that was just awesome. Not to leave anybody out in the cold on this, there are plenty of other free tools that can do this kind of thing as well. In particular, QGIS is one that can do these kind of things. It might just take a little bit longer, but you can do it. Okay, Tableau. So one of the things that we got complaints about in the past, and I think this probably even predates Tableau, is that a lot of times the portraits looked fuzzy, especially when they were printed. And Ben mentioned this earlier, it's very hard to get high resolution images, especially from official sources. Your governmental relations folks may be able to help you with that in some cases, but it is what it is. So one thing we really focused on with this new design is to try to get the highest resolution photos possible, because you may have noticed that our space for the photos is a little bit bigger on these new sheets than on the old ones. So one trick that I learned really made a huge difference was when I created my dashboard, instead of setting it to the standard letter page size, which was 850 by 1100 in Tableau, I set it to 2550 by 3300, which is just multiplying both of those numbers by 3. And so basically that lets you, well, it's going to force you really to put a higher resolution image in there to just fill the space. But that also, when printed, it will automatically shrink it down to the size of the page, but it won't lose the resolution. We were just having so much trouble putting in images that were sized to a regular sheet of paper and then printing them, and things that getting fuzzier and fuzzier at each step of the way. So that's a trick that we learned. Also, I don't know why dashboard image objects, which are very easy to use in Tableau, will not print very well. I've tried to get an answer from Tableau and have not been able to get one, but they always look fuzzy when they're printed. And unfortunately, we do print these. So although these days, maybe not as much, still we just want the PDF versions to look as high quality as possible. So use background images is what we found, and that will solve that problem. I'm not going to go into that, but that is a solution. Also, in this sheet, this new version, this new design, the design follows the U of I system style guide, which specifies certain fonts. And so the lesson I guess we learned is you can actually work with your own fonts. You just have to install them on your machine that you're using Tableau with, and also on the Tableau server if you want to print them out. Now, when you look at them on the web, every computer that looks at it will have to have that font installed for it to display properly, which they really won't have that in almost every case. So Tableau is just going to substitute that, substitute a font for that font that you've used on the web. But the key thing is the PDFs that we generate are still going to look, they're going to have that proper font as long as this font is installed on the Tableau server. Or if you're going to generate it from your desktop, which you can do, just make sure it's installed on the desktop. And then if you're going to save as PDF, that will include the font that way. Also, the website is using Tableau JavaScript, the Tableau JavaScript API, as they call it, to dynamically change the sheets. So in the dashboard, we have two parameters. One's called the type param, and the other is the dist param, district param. And so on our website, as you see below here, it's a little snippet of it. We can choose the type and the district, and then as we choose that, we just send that through JavaScript to our Tableau server, and then it will update the sheet appropriately, dynamically. Let's see, Tab CMD. So Tab CMD is used with Tableau server to automate processes. I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, but basically I just created a batch script, and I did it in SAS actually, that is calling out to Tab CMD once for each sheet using those type param and dist param parameters that I just mentioned. So the end game here is that it's generating all of my PDFs for me, and it's even saving them right to the web server directly. I don't even have to copy anything over. So I click a button. I could even schedule this if I wanted to. And all of the PDFs, all 248 of them, are generated for me all at one time, which is really great because things do change. And so whenever things change, I can just run the script. You can see that it's just at the beginning deleting all the old stuff, and then connecting to the Tableau server. And you do have to enter a password, although you could hard code that in. And then it's just going right to the sheet, passing in the type and the number of the district, and then that gets saved. It's off the screen here, but it gets saved in a location on the web server. And then we do make a zip file version of it as well. So this was the federal Senate, and then these are all the congressional ones here. And then you can see this is Illinois Senate. So it just keeps going. But the concept is all the same for all these different district types. So these summary sheets are available on demand through this website that we were talking about. It's a login secured site. And I already went over this on the other slide, but just to show it again, we just use that API, and you can choose from a drop-down the type and the district, and then the website will show you what you need. So you can get that on demand. We used to have like a box folder where we put all the stuff, and then we'd have to keep updating the box folder when things changed. This way, there's just kind of the single source of truth. Just go to the website, download the information, we keep it up to date whenever things change. So what may happen in the future with this? One thing that's not here on the slide, but just came to mind, is we never anticipated that we would not be able to meet with legislators in person and hand them sheets. I am glad that we built this on the web so that we can provide the sheets to whoever has access directly electronically when we aren't printing them. But it's still valuable to have that PDF printed sheet. It's just, fitting on one page and having that as a resource is very helpful. So the Institute for Research on Innovation and Science, this is IRIS. Some of you may have heard of this, but probably not too many. The reason I bring it up is we always seem to get asked, could you show us some of this data broken down, the federal research data broken down by district? Unfortunately, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. There's just a lot involved in that. So IRIS, this consortium of research universities, which the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign is a member of, has done this analysis. They have two different analyses. They have the federal research spending by congressional district, and then they have federal research goods and services spending by state, House, and Senate district. Like I said, only Urbana-Champaign is currently an IRIS member. If we were to be able to do this for the entire system, we would need UIC to join IRIS as well. And, you might think, well, what about UIS? They do have some federal research funding, but the membership cost for IRIS is $25,000 per year. So that's probably pretty cost prohibitive to most institutions, except the large R1 schools. So UIC may be able to do it. UIS probably won't. But if we could get a hold of that data, if we had most of our system universities in the consortium, then maybe we could add it to the sheets. Because like I said, that is something that seems to come up often as people ask about that. So that's it. There's a contact info for me and Ben. And I appreciate your time, and just going to open it up now for questions. Thank you.
All right, well, hopefully that all came through okay on the Zoom share. Yeah, so Ben and I are here live and in person from our apartment in the house. And if you have any questions, yeah, we'd be happy to answer anything. So you can just unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat, whatever you prefer. Oh, hang on. It looks like. Oh, okay. Sorry, Zoom was being weird.
I got like an update in the middle of that. So if anybody posted anything in the chat before that, I'm wondering if that could have gotten lost, but I didn't see anything yet.
Me neither.
Well, one thing I can do just to maybe add to the presentation a little bit, I do have my worksheets here in Tableau open, and I hope you can see that. This is the previous design, as we mentioned. The new design is still in development. And that one, it's not that one. Yeah, that one looks a little weird here because it's so big. Like I mentioned, we had to make it 3 times the size for the higher resolution photos. But this is, this is the same general concept that we're going to be following for the new design. And it's really not, anything complicated. The only tricky part, I guess, is just the picture. And we touched on it, that we were using background images, but if any of you are familiar with Tableau, you might be interested to see this, where this is in Windows in my way. There we go. If you go in here to background images, so the way this is working is it's just all mapped, like each image. Unfortunately, you had to do this kind of one by one, although you can open Tableau files. They're just XML files. You can start copying and pasting, and it won't have a problem with that as long as you're careful. Always take a backup of your workbook before you do that. But this is just like a kind of a one-time thing where you have to map an image to your selection. So, I mentioned this earlier too. We have a combined field that takes the district type and the district number together. And so when the dashboard is, when you're on the dashboard and you're selecting each of those individually, it combines those two into one field, and then you can map that to an image. So you can see if I go in here to each of these images, that's the image that's going to come up when those variables are selected, the parameters are selected in the dashboard. So it's a bit odd because you're seeing these x-axis, y-axis values, 0 and 1. It's not really the traditional use for a background image, but it works pretty well. I mean, it obviously allows you to, if I go in here and change, to, I don't know, house 13. Actually, I'm not sure who that is, but maybe some of you know.
So
and there you go.
Chris,
yeah.
I mean, what you're showing us here, it's beautiful. it's presented well. I guess I'm just struggling to kind of understand how a smaller place like us, I'm from Rush University, we're not that big, like how we would be using something like this, or how we could even develop. I'm an office of 2.
Right.
So we really don't have the I was going to say manpower, but it's 2 females, so we don't have the female power to actually pull off something like this for our institution.
Sure. Well, and I'm sure that there are few, and honestly, we've kind of scoped this out. You know, we're always seeing what our friends are doing at other universities, and it does seem to be the large Research One universities that all have this kind of thing. You know, University of California has a really nice one. I like it better than ours, actually. And of course, University of California has a lot more resources than the University of Illinois does. So it kind of speaks to your point. I will say that if anybody is interested, I'm more than happy to share the sheet. You know, you can use it as a starting point in terms of just, you know, a general design or whatever, and how you might, at least especially on the Tableau side of things, like this is how this could work. I realize that it would probably take a lot of tweaking to get it where you need to be, but that's assuming you have Tableau, of course, as well. Although I think you could use
We do.
Tableau Public. Okay, yeah, and you could use Tableau Public to do some of those things as well. So yeah, I've already actually worked a little bit with people at Northern Illinois University. I've tried to share all the information I have and just things I've learned, I guess, with them, because they have a small, I think, kind of smaller scale initiative, similar thing. So yeah, I would offer that. But yeah, I totally get that as well. I know that this is a big effort, and honestly, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that, you know, we have those Illinois legislative requests that we have to respond to every year. And so if we didn't have to do that already, then maybe we wouldn't be doing this. I don't know. That goes way back, but that kind of helps, because then since we have to do that, mandated to do it by the state anyways, then we have some of this data already at our disposal. So that might have driven that from, you know, back in 1995 when we started doing the sheets. That's just a guess, but.
Hey, Chris, it's Eric from IBHE, and I had a quick question. How flexible would this be? For instance, if you wanted to make it a little bit more topical and include some of the great work that the U of I system is doing specific to COVID, like could you add that quickly with this template, or would that take a major rewrite of everything that you're doing?
It would be fairly easy. So in the new design, let me see if I can bring that up. Scroll down a little bit here. Sorry, this one's just harder to navigate. Yeah, let me go back to the old one. That's just too much of a pain to deal with right now. So, you know, these are just sheets in Tableau, and this is all floating. So it's not like, you know, locked into place. So for instance, I added this one about the Prairie Research Institute just last year. And that was, you know, just like you said, COVID, you know, whatever. PRI is a big, important part of the university. And sometimes people forget that it's actually part of the U of I right now. So we thought, let's add a line for them. So it really wasn't, you know, since this is all in Tableau here, all I have to do is kind of, you know, move things around a little bit, add a new sheet. So if I go to the sheet, then there's my data for that part of it. And then the text. Here, let me move this out of the way. The text is just static anyways, you know, I just go type it. So I will say, that said, with the flexibility and all that, one thing that's not so good maybe about this design, being a one-pager, as we call it, there's not a lot of room to add things. You could see, like, this is jam-packed as it is. So I did have to do a little finagling to get Prairie Research Institute added to the sheet. So yeah, if you're talking about like, let's add 10 new metrics to highlight all of our COVID related work that we're doing, technically it'd be very easy, but design wise, almost impossible, really. So we've talked about, do we do multiple pages? And actually in the past we had multiple page designs for this, but the whole idea was legislators are busy people. How many pages do you want to hand them? Actually, we used to hand them a packet of information. You know, it's like 20, 30 pages. Nobody wants that anymore. They want, give me the bullet points and let me move on with my day. So that's that tension, I guess, between flexibility and, you know, this is what I need to know right now. So our designer suggested that in the future, we might want to think about just, instead of 8.5 by 11, maybe, you know, like 11 by 14 sheets or whatever. And that would build in a little bit more flexibility in terms of that. But yeah, technically speaking, all I would have to do to add something is just go onto the dashboard, add some text, add a new sheet, and then in the database, add a column. So hopefully that answers that question. So do we have until 11:15? I can't remember when the session ends.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Well, if anybody's interested, I could show you too, real quickly, you know, this the shape file, the custom polygon thing. This was new to me. Tableau has these built-in maps, which are just amazing. You can do so much with it. And this is a fairly new thing in that it's using Mapbox, which it just goes out, I think, basically to their website to pull these in. And you get these beautiful vector-based maps, which will print really well. They'll look great on any size screen. And so if I go...
Hey, Chris, are you...
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Okay, go ahead. I was like, I don't know if you have something open, but we're not seeing it if you were doing something. But if not, you're good.
Oh, I'm sorry. It says I'm doing screen share, but let me... You know, maybe I'm sharing a different window. Thank you for mentioning that. Here, let me go back to Zoom here. New share. Yeah, I'm sharing the wrong Tableau window right now. There we go. Okay, now you should see it. Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, so sorry to talk about those beautiful maps and you couldn't see them, but because I have all these polygons imported, which I did in Alteryx, you know, I can just go in here in Tableau and it's just dynamically generating, like I said, these really nice maps, and you can customize them. If I go up to map, I think it's the map layers or the map options. Yeah. So if I want, I can just take out, let's see, what would be a good one? See, I can start removing elements from the map. Maybe it's too busy. I kind of like it a little busier, actually. It gives the more context, the better when you're dealing with your district and where it is in relation to this neighborhood and in Chicago and this part of the state and things like that. So yeah, and you can see like this one's obviously a little bit bigger, more rural. So this is pretty cool. And this little map over here is updating based on this stuff as well. I'm trying to get one that's more downstate. Now there's so many. There we go. Yeah. So around Nashville, Illinois, and Greenville, Centralia. Yeah. So yeah, this, like I said, is a little goofy because it's kind of like a kid drawing on the map, where this is very defined. Obviously, this is extremely precise, but this I have to exaggerate a little bit because some of those districts in Chicago are just so tiny that otherwise it would be like the teeniest little dot on the map. So this was a fun part of the project for me to try to figure out how to do this kind of thing in Tableau. And you know, it's one of those things that Tableau, is there anything Tableau can't do? I haven't found it yet. I will say a lot of times you have to get pretty creative. I mentioned earlier that to do this, I couldn't use the built-in shapefile feature in Tableau. And that was because, you know, my data requires me to do some selecting across different data sets, I guess. And for some reason, the shapefile support that's built into Tableau doesn't seem to handle that too well. So it could just be because I'm new to working with it and just didn't know the best way to do it. But yeah, I just thought that would be worth sharing as well. People like maps. All right. Well, last call for questions.
All right, I think that's good. Well, thank you guys. That was great. I really appreciated that. You know, we work in Tableau too, so everything I can see Tableau related is always kind of a fun new feature that I can even learn for ourselves. So, our next session starts at 11:30 for the last set of concurrent sessions, followed by the closing session, which is only around like 15 minutes long at 12:30. So look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, one more. Make sure to do your evaluation